Tonight, I especially want to thank the Ephraimson Family Fund out of Indianapolis for sponsoring the Visiting Artist lecture series, which allowed us to bring Joe Anderson to campus. And I'd like to introduce our gallery director, Kirsten Skiles, and she's going to kind of introduce Joe a little bit more and tell you a little bit about his background, and he can take it from there. So thanks for coming.
Well, I met Joe about 13 years ago at a blacksmithing conference. He's actually been working as a professional artist blacksmith since 1969. He has worked in a number of public and private collections, including the R.J. Reynolds Company in North Carolina, and the National Ornamental Metals Museum down in Memphis, Tennessee. He's taught blacksmithing workshops all across the country and at craft schools, including Penland School of Crafts, also in North Carolina. He's won numerous awards for his work at art fairs and also at exhibitions. He also won the Golden Anvil Award for outstanding contributions to the art and craft of blacksmithing with the California Blacksmith Association. So we're really excited to have him here, and I'll let him take over and show you his work from the beginning.
All right. Thank you very much for coming. It's a real honor to be invited to be here. I guess the way I'm going to approach this tonight is to talk about how I got to where I am today. And I started playing with metal when I was really young. My father's hobby was gunsmithing, and he had a shop built in the basement. And he died when I was pretty young, and there was nobody to slap my hands, so I kind of added that shop to my playgrounds, and I went down there and fiddled with things, and there was all sorts of metal to experiment with, and I just made a mess down there and had a great time. And when I was about 15, my older brother came home for a visit. He'd been living out in New Mexico, and he learned silversmithing from some Indians out there. And he came home for the visit and got me started making a project with him. And this is the project. It's a little powder horn for a flintlock rifle. And the parts, there was a huge amount to learn about fitting parts and silver soldering. It was a great project, and he made one, never touched mine, just did his, and then went about his business and worked on other things, and some of it took me 2 days to catch up to what he'd shown me in 10 minutes, but this was the end result, and it's what really gave me a kickstart. In high school, I went to an experimental high school. There was 2 of them in the country, and they were public schools, but it was set up very much like a college and allowed me to have big blocks of time that I could focus on something, and I was pretty much a lousy student, but very much interested in the art room. When I was in high school, at that time, I started making these little sculptures out of old spoons and forks, and I had no idea that they would. That I would be a sculptor in the future and everything, but I made these and sold them to the teachers for spending money. Anyways, they were really fun pieces, and they gave me a lot of encouragement too. My metal shop teacher, I had a little forge at home, a little tin portable forge, and I talked him into letting me bring it into school. And he bought me a big bag of coal and he gave me credit for a class to set it up in the corner of the metal shop and just experiment and figure out what I could do with it. So that was my first real experience of hitting hot iron. This is also a piece that I made when I was in high school. That first piece I showed you, the powder horn, these beads are just basically the same shapes as the powder horn, soldered from two pieces. I didn't have the money to be playing with silver, so the brass worked just fine. And the brass on these is actually gooseneck underneath the sink. It's chrome plated on the outside and brass. And I took pieces of it and sawed them down the side and opened them up into flat sheet and started there. So these are all chrome plated on the inside. When I got out of high school, my girlfriend and I did a 7,000-mile hitchhiking trip. I grew up in Minnesota, and we went up into Canada and down the west coast and all over the place for an entire summer. And when we got to San Francisco, I saw people, artists and craftspeople, selling out on the streets. Street artists is what we call them. Anyways, I decided that that was something that I could do. Went back to Minnesota and got my old job back in an iron foundry and saved up $1,000 and moved to San Francisco in a truck that I bought for $60. Anyways, when I got there, I started selling on the streets and quickly found out that I didn't know near as much about silversmithing as I thought I did. But I caught on real fast. I had enough money for the first month's rent, and then I was really unsure of the second, and I asked my mom for a loan, and she sent me $250. I made the rent, so I bought $200 worth of gold and $200 worth of silver and $50 worth of stones, and started in. This is a few years later, but I really responded to the stones and quickly found Indian jewelry was very popular at that point. And so they had sort of an Indian jewelry feel to them, but I responded very much to what the stones themselves were. Anyways, these are a couple of the pieces that I was selling them as fast as I could make them. So these are a few pieces that have survived. This is my shop today. It's not very big. It's big enough for me and one helper if I need some help. Everything I do is forged hot. All these pieces, I heat the iron up to around 2,200 degrees, which is bright yellow, almost white. At that point, it's soft enough to manipulate with hammers and move. It's much easier to stretch or draw a piece of iron out than it is to make it fat. So you start with something fat and work down from there. This is my little gas forge. It's not very big, maybe 18 inches deep. Everything that I do, my scale of my work is kind of limited to what fits in there. And I can get quite a bit out of it. These are my two main tools. They're pneumatic power hammers. Each one of them has a self-contained air compressors in them, and they're run by a foot pedal. The one on the left, the hammer weight is 110 pounds. This one's a little bit lighter than that, but they allow me to do in an hour what would take me a day and a half by hand, just working with a hammer and anvil. And with the lines that I play with now, and the calligraphic feel of those lines, they really start off as much smaller pieces. So these give me the advantage to draw things out more at a rate that's closer to as fast as I can think. Anyways, they are very much responsible for the look that I've developed. You work to the tools that you have. Here's one of them working. You can see the metal start to be pinching up in the front. The hammers go up and down pretty fast, a couple hundred beats a minute. So you really have to get into a rhythm with the machine. There you can see the iron's really moving. But a chunk of iron like this, which is about this long and an inch square, can easily be drawn out to something that's 3.5 or 4 feet long into an element. I work off of three anvils. Each one's bigger than this one is really big, and I can swing big hammers and it doesn't bounce around. The other two have little differences in the shape of the horn and the shape of the whole anvil, and allows me to get into different corners of what I'm working on, and be able to produce what I want to get out of the iron. When I first started doing the iron work, I was doing jewelry out in California, and I got tired of doing the jewelry and decided that my heart really wasn't in it, and I wanted to work at a little bit bigger scale. A friend of mine saw a little spoon this long that I'd made when I was in high school or just out, and I was pretty much done with the jewelry, so he encouraged me to switch right over and start making spoons. And I, in 6 weeks, switched from being a jeweler to being the beginnings of what I do today. And this is quite a few years into making these spoons. The first ones were quite dented and rough looking, but it was always the best that I could do. And the spoons allowed me to make that same handle over and over and over and over again, which gave me the practice that I needed to learn how to control the way I wanted the iron to be shaped. My first business when I was doing it was called Simply Spoons. And at the beginning, I didn't even know how to make a rack to hang them on. I was buying little screw-in hooks from the hardware store and giving them a hook to screw into the wall. Anyways, I sold these at craft fairs, ended up wholesaling them to craft galleries all over the country, and they allowed me to learn quite a lot. I started to play with doing animal figurative work and applied it to the kitchen utensils naturally. You learn a little bit, you want to expand, you don't want to drop out everything that you know and start over, so everything's a progression, just like anywhere else. These are real nice serving pieces.
Are those the size of just regular serving pieces?
Those are 11 or 12 inches long.
And the spoons?
The spoon's a little bit longer. They're made to cook in the kitchen, so they're a few inches longer than that. These are much later on making the spoons. These are forged out of stainless steel, and they're using my power hammers that I was showing you. And if you look at this chunk of steel, that rectangle of steel that's sitting there, that's the starting piece that all of these utensils came out of, each one of them. So it's very radical forgings. It's taking a little block of it and completely rearranging the material. Stainless steel is quite a bit tougher material and harder to work with than regular mild steel is, but I found for kitchen utensils and things, people really like not having to take care of them. I started taking that idea of doing they call it carved animal heads, carved heads, and started expanding on that. They're not really carved. Iron, when it's hot, moves very much like a piece of clay. You push on it and it distorts and it moves out of the way of your fingers. So you can't use your fingers to move it. So you make punches and chisels. The heads themselves are usually done pinched in a vise right behind the head, so you've got something to support it. But the eyes, if you look a little bit around the eyes and the nose, the way they swell up when you push the hammer the punches into it, the nostrils flare behind it. And the same thing would happen if you're playing with a piece of clay. So the same rules very much apply. Everything I've always done has been a progression. The kitchen utensils were the one thing that I did as a production thing. When I moved to North Carolina from the San Francisco area, we moved to a very rural area, and I needed to have a way of earning a living because my neighbors weren't going to support us. So I was doing shows up and down the coast, and I had to be consistent a little bit. Anyways, when I made andirons and things like this, every set was different. I was always playing with a different look. Some of them were very loose with big floppy wings. This one's very tight and formal. This is a fireplace set. It's made up entirely of snakes. And I don't know exactly what was, I was having fun with snake's heads at that time. And the stand is a snake, and they curl over, and the ends of the tools themselves are snake's heads. But it was a real fun piece. I never made anything like it again. This shows one of the heads up close to show how elaborate the details can be, and it's all just done with little punches and chisels. But you can get a lot out of a piece of iron. After several years, or quite a few years of doing that, I started getting tired of doing all that very close, very high detail work in a small area, and started playing with lines more. and dropping that detail. This is a fireplace set with elephants for the handles, elephant heads for the handles. And I kept the detail part just at the end of the trunk as a little peanut picker. You know, really has the detail and the life and nostrils to it, and the rest of it is plain just with the lines. It's also an idea of taking one piece of metal and see if you can do the whole thing out of one piece rather than putting a bunch of different things together. The base on this piece is magic carpet. I sort of imagine this to be an Aladdin's lamp kind of thing. So magic carpet in the center. Those are sort of scrolly pages that the tools are leaning up against, and up at the top is Aladdin's lamp that the broom is hanging off of. I did do other elephant sets, but this is the only one that was just like this. I started playing with lamps. Again, it was a way to play with lines, and not too much detail. And it was a real interesting challenge to figure out how to make something work with all the curves and the things that were starting to show up in my lines, and to work with that straight shaft going up to the light. So this is a real nice solution. At the same time, I was making the lampshades because I couldn't find any place to buy ones that I thought matched the lamps. Here's another bird form. Here's a table again. It's still playing with an animal form. He's got that little tail sticking out the back, and I sort of imagined the legs as, you know, feet on the ends of legs. All the time that all these years that I was doing this, I had religiously avoided traditional ironwork, which meant no scrolls, no flint strikers, no anything that looked, no hinges, no anything that looked like some kind of a traditional thing. No knives, because I was doing these art and craft shows, and having those things in the booth attracted people that I didn't want to talk to. They wanted to tell me about what their grandfather had done and everything, but they weren't real customers, so I didn't give them anything to feed off of. Anyways, I started playing with trying. I needed some kind of volume with these lines, so I started doing a little bit with the scrolls. They still weren't a traditional scroll. They were using the idea, but traditional scrolls are actually a mathematical formula that is done that determines the shape of one. So this is playing with it. Along with the work that I've done and sold at shows, I've also done a little bit of architectural work. Not very much. I had the opportunity to work on this house. It's a hand-built house that a friend of mine made. Not too far from where we live, and he wanted just plain hand railings on his front steps. And he just plain. I don't want anything on them, just plain. And I refused to do them. And he came after me for 5 years every once in a while, and kept at me, and I just had no interest in doing a couple of straight hand railings. I had other things to do. So finally he asked me what I wanted to do, and I came up with this idea. It's using what's called acanthus leaves, which are used up in the wood decoration at the top of the arch and everything up there too. Used a lot in older architectural work. So these railings have acanthus leaves, or my style of stylized acanthus leaves that are used to fill it out and give it some dimension. This was actually done in 2 phases. Originally he just wanted handrails, so I made handrails with a little bit of decoration underneath. And then after about 6 months he decided that it wasn't safe for his grandkids to be there, and I needed to fill it in. So I came up with something and filled in all the other space. So it was a 2-part job. Up on the porch itself, you can see the acanthus leaves again on the railing there. This was pushing the bounds of what he was prepared for, but I thought of this sort of as a chorus line of a lot of dance movement to it and things, and really thought of it as a bunch of figures, or had that kind of a feel to it, and I really loved the way it came out. This is one of I did a pair of these lamps to go with it. You can see the acanthus leaves in the wood pieces right next to it. And these lamps are about 3 feet tall, to give you an idea of the scale. Inside the house, there was 3 floors, and the third floor had low ceilings and was up under the eaves, and the stairway that went up there. This angled line followed the roof line, and up at the top of the stairs there was 2 mirrored rooms, one on each side of the house, and they both needed some sort of a guard there up at the top. So I came up with this idea, and because the rooms were separated, I used the same basic frame and filled them with completely different motifs on the inside. This gives you an idea of how they fit into the space and worked as a safety railing, the handrail railing coming up the steps. This is a fun piece that I did for another client. No forging at all in it. It's all made out of stainless steel. And his kids were giving him the pigs with wings. And I thought and still think they're about as tacky as anything could be. But James Michael wanted me to make a weather vane for him that was pigs with wings, and I refused, so I made him this dancing pig. And the pig itself is about a little over 5 feet tall. That's a really big piece. In the 90s, I was doing something in the shop that had a bunch of scrolls to it. I think I was making a umbrella stand or something like that. But there was a bunch of little scrolls laying on the floor, and I slipped on one that were leftovers. And I slipped on one day, and almost fell and broke my neck, but it went across the floor and it banged into two other ones. And I looked down and what I saw there was a bird. And so I spent the rest of the day taking that idea, and by the end of the day I had three funny looking birds. And that started me in a whole different direction. And gave me the first start on doing things that were sculptural and for the first time didn't have some sort of function that was applied to them. The first ones I did, I thought that looked like a fine bird, but and did everything that I wanted it to do. But when I took them to shows, people were really resistant to buying them because they didn't have wings. And I got a lot of grief for them not having wings. People wanted them to be a whole bird. And so we went back and forth, and I finally learned how to make wings. And it's really started, this is the beginning of what I do now, which is playing with these calligraphic lines in 3 dimensions. And if you think about it, most things are solid forms. So you walk around it and it doesn't have to, it has dimension everywhere you go, everywhere you look at it. This has to have, the lines don't have anything to separate them, and you're looking through the body. So the lines have to work together, and any way you approach it, for the way my idea of how things should be, there shouldn't be a dead spot. There shouldn't be something flat that doesn't work and doesn't make your eye happy. This is my daughter, and gives you an idea of the scale of some of these birds. This one's probably close to 6.5 feet tall or so. Birds started really being heron. A lot of them were heron things, not so much that I never intended them to be a heron or any other kind of bird for that matter. But the beaks and the long beak really gave me a line that I liked to use to accent the other lines. And a shorter beak didn't always serve the purpose. So I used it a lot. These are ones outside the door of my shop to give you an idea. Most of these were being used outdoors in people's gardens. So this gives you an idea of them sort of in an outdoor space. Here's one, I started playing more with the lines and getting a lot more movement and lot more movement in the tails, using the wings in different ways, having them cross over and fill out the body and give them much more dimension. This is one obviously that worked well with a smaller beak. This one's got a very complex tail. These rely very much on the side forging and spreading the lines sideways that gives me that calligraphic line. If they were just done out of straight lines, they would be straight bars of steel. They'd have very little interest to the piece at all. This is just another one. It's probably 5.5 feet tall. I got into I was thinking about girls along this line. I don't know what was going through my head, but considered a lot of these birds to be girls, and the way the tail starts off off of the body and goes up first and then cascades down, I sort of considered it something like the bustle on a Victorian dress, and then going down into ladies' skirts and a flowing gown and everything. So that was what I was putting into it for me, and I wasn't really too interested about or too worried about what other people really thought was going on. Again, with these birds, everyone was different. It was always a progression, but every time I'd start a bird, I was consciously doing something different than what I'd just done. Starting off and taking it in a different direction to explore the lines, and see what I could come up with. This bird, I was, at this point, I wanted, for some reason I wanted to work on a little bit smaller scale, and I wanted people to think my work was nice enough to be something that they'd have in their house rather than in their garden. So I started making things smaller to sort of force them in that direction. And this one was the very beginning of that. For some reason, I really knew there was something new starting. And this one I named Transition because it was a real feeling that I had that day when I did it. This one is this bird right here. He's been through a couple different color changes over the years. He's mine now. He went to shows for a while and didn't sell, and he just belongs to me. When I first did it, I thought for some reason to me it had a Japanese feel to it. And so I named it Geisha. And after a while, I decided it was a boy, so I renamed him Samurai. This bird's also in the show. I did a commission for somebody. They built a log tower 50 or 60 feet tall and had a staircase that went inside the tower and went up to the top, and they didn't chink the logs. So you got into this thing and went up the staircase, and all this filtered light came in between the logs, and it was just a magical place to walk into. Anyways, when you got to the top of the stairs, she wanted something. She wanted a red-tailed hawk, or some sort of big bird to get in your face. So I made this red-tailed hawk, or painted it red, which made it a red-tailed hawk. But I made a bird with his wings outspread like that, and big clawed feet, that really looked like he was protecting the place. But as he came up the stairs and you went around him, he never quite got in your face. You walked around and you got to see him from all the way around and everything, but he never got in your way. So it was really a successful thing. And I liked the hawk so much that I came home and made this one for me. It's plain with just three lines in the little piece for the beak. The wings start off as wings and then extend down to the base, and somewhere along the way turn into the stylized legs. And this one, to me, I always think of, quite often think of the pieces that I make as the birds that I was doing as people in birds' clothing. So I was always thinking them as people in some way. So this one I call Dressed to Kill, part because it was a hawk and it related that way, and from a different angle, this tail here gave me the idea of it being a big tie, and so it was like a dapper gentleman going out on the town, and he was dressed to kill. Anyways, that's another real fun one. This one's playing with 2 lines, which is 3 lines is something that really makes something that a challenge that I've put up to myself to see what I can say with just 3 lines, and I've done that a lot. Paring it down to 2 lines is really, really difficult, and this is a very, very successful piece. Again, it's a bird form. At some point, I got a little more abstract, and I dropped the beaks off of them. The beaks disappeared, and for a lot of people, the birds disappeared too, but I knew what they were. This is using a lot of dance movement. Again, it's playing with just 3 lines. 3 lines to get all that motion and all that volume to it. Works very, very well in the round. I like red a lot, so I do a lot of things with muted reds. This one is another way of playing with those 3 lines, and again, like I was saying, having the wing elements come down and turn into the feet. This one in a stance that's probably a little more recognizable as legs of a bird. This shows one in somebody's living room, so you can get an idea how they can work in a home environment. This one is a very abstracted bird. I offset the wings pretty radically, and he's got the head going down, meeting the base. I really like the way that it came out, but it's probably about as abstract as I've gotten with the bird forms. This is a fairly recent piece, and last May or June, a friend of ours came to visit from the West Coast, and this and another one were in the shop, and Toby just it didn't have a beak on them, and to me they were complete birds, and Toby just couldn't see the birds, couldn't see them at all. So he went back home, and I quickly put two beaks on the pieces, and took pictures and emailed them to him and said, "See, I told you they were birds." But it was, that's all that they really needed to change it. When they worked very effectively with just the 3 lines, it really didn't need the beak at all, but they looked wonderful with it. I think it was 2005 client that had some other pieces of mine, came to me and they wanted me to do something for their yard. And they wanted it to be big. They wanted it to have a lot of presence. They offered me good money to do it. And we played around and realized pretty fast that the bird forms that I was doing didn't have, the line mass wasn't enough to have the presence in the space that they wanted to put it. So I came up with a maquette of using these forged forms. And what they requested was something that represented their family. And so the symbolism that I came up with this was the two bigger elements that are facing that direction was the guy and his wife. There were bigger forms, bigger human forms just suggested by those lines. They had 3 daughters, so the other 3 elements became their daughters, and the elements, all of the elements had a wave-like quality to them. So they quickly adopted the idea of it was their family at the beach. And it was exactly the kind of thing that they were thinking of. So it worked out really well. And I couldn't forge, this thing's 9 feet tall, and they're really big pieces to work with. And I couldn't forge them out of iron. They were too big for me to handle. Also getting them hot, the radiant heat off of a piece that big would just fry me, being that close to it. So I chose to forge it out of a forgeable aluminum. And aluminum is about half the weight of iron, so that got the pieces down to a size that I could, the biggest one I could just barely handle, but I could handle it. And also the temperature was much less. Instead of 2,200 degrees, it was about 800 degrees, so it solved the problem of the radiant heat. There's another picture of it in my shop. There's lots and lots of texture to these pieces. Works very well in the round too. So anyways, at this point, I guess I was looking for a new direction to go and possibly push the birds as far as I could, trying to always do something different. I'd sort of run out of things to play with. And so I took this idea and immediately grabbed onto it and started playing with pedestal tabletop pieces. Because of that first one being his family at the beach and everything, I immediately started looking at them the same way myself. So they immediately started to, in my mind, be human forms. This one was called Watching Over. It's a big form up on the top. If you consider the top a head, and he's looking down at this little form in the center, and he's watching over it. It's very, I've probably said it before, but it's very important for me to make these things work in the round. Any way you approach my work, hopefully there's interest and there's not a dead spot in the line, in the lines. I work very, very hard to achieve that. And I try not to let things out of the shop before they're there. This one I put in because it's, with the 3 elements, it's as simplified as I could get with the human form. So you've got the big element on the top that is the head. It swings down and meets the base and becomes a leg down where it meets the base. The next element down becomes one arm swung over and the other arm pointed where the element gets wide. That becomes the other arm. Down below, the wide part of the next element works for me as a hip bone, and it swings down and becomes the second leg on the figure. But that one I think explains what my idea of these things quite a bit better than anything else I could show you. When I say I want them to look good from all directions, that includes up through from the bottom and down from the top. The reason for that is if it's successful looking up through the bottom, then you can make this sculpture 40 feet tall, and it can be a monumental piece, and you can walk underneath it, and it has just as much interest as this does being this tall. It's something that's approachable and magic from any way it's approached. This is just another form using one of the forms with a set of arms, and the other form without. But if you look at them, look at them as two human forms, then down where they cross over, at where it connects to the base, you've got a single set of legs there, and they share the legs. And depending on how you look at it, the legs can belong to one of the forms or the other. This one's got a lot going on in it, and from the other side, one of the figures looks like he's playing air guitar. He doesn't have a guitar, but he's strumming away and having a great time. And looking at it from this side, you've got two people that are dancing with their arms thrown in the air and just having a great time with the music. This one I named At the Ball, and it's a female figure, and by inverting the things, I got the elements, turning them upside down, I got a whole different feel. So the element that connects to the base, if you follow that up, the tip of that becomes the head. The other element becomes the arms, one of them swung up like this, one down like that. And the big wide part at the bottom becomes her gown that's going down and spreading out into her gown. I really like the way it turned out too. This one, and a lot of them are that I've made, you can play with and look at from two different sides. And this one, this leg, if you look at it, that the big element up there and it's facing this way, then this leg is a leg. This leg is down here touching the ground, and this one is kicked back as if he's running just flat out as fast as he can go. And then if you come over here and tip your eye and make the bottom of it his face and everything, then this leg going up becomes a dancing leg. I named it Finish Line, And the idea of it is a race, and then the joy of winning at the end, and just sort of that exhilaration. This one is very abstract. I named it Superman, and it'd take a lot to explain what's going on, but he's got his cape on and full regalia. He's here in the show. This one also plays with two figures. It's got very complex lines, but it's two figures that are in an embrace with their arms around each other. A very, very successful piece. This one I named Parade. Again, this is a hip bone going down into a leg, down into a leg. These are shoulder blades or shoulders going up, and the arms swinging up. And he's very much to me like a band leader or whatever, out leading the parade and just marching along and pumping out energy. This, I've never ever been able to do anything that worked on the wall. 35 or more years of doing this, I always had to have a connection to the ground somehow, and never understood it, and just was completely bewildered. And something happened after the first of the year this year, and all of a sudden I understood what was going on and how to approach it. So all these ones that are on the wall here are all new this year. Here's another one. It's real interesting to play with the lines. They make wonderful shadows through the day that adds a lot to them. I've also done, there's some pieces in the show that are more really figurative. This is one I made quite a while back, and it's about 5 foot tall. That I was playing with the female form. The hair is actually made out of chain about the size of a motorcycle drive chain. These are some candlesticks using the idea of a human form with a little kind of pooch pot belly or a pregnant belly. This was also something that didn't sell well at the shows because people wanted them to have arms, just like they wanted wings on the birds. And I think they're wonderful pieces. These are here in the show. Again, the color has changed. I don't know what causes me to take things and put them back in the shop and make more work for myself, but sometimes I do. I think they're lovely the way the lines work. And I very much consider the one on the right-hand side to be a mature form, the one on the left-hand side to be an adolescent form. So I called them Mother of the Sun, Daughter of the Moon. I started playing with getting rid of my smooth lines for a time and trying to play with lots and lots of texture. And it's real interesting to do. To get this kind of texture out of a piece of iron, I have to start with a little short, very fat piece, and then draw it out from there to have, when I get finished with it, to have that texture. If if I start with a small piece, then the texture never gets built up, and I end up with something that has no interest when it's finished. This one's got a lot of dance movement to it. This one too. This one I called Strut. He's very much out there and on the way somewhere. They work very, very nicely together in groups. The kind of thing you could walk by in the house and once a week make them all move around a little bit and get a whole new sculpture going on. This one, we were watching that new Alice in Wonderland show a year or two ago or whenever it was. And I went down to the shop and I was kind of inspired somehow by it. I enjoyed the show, so I made this piece. And when I got done with it, I decided that it had a very Victorian kind of a look to it, and I needed some way to deal with a base that was effective. So I decided it was Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and made the base into a chessboard. So it's Alice in the Red Queen's Court. This shows it to you from the side, so you can see that Victorian sort of push on the back of the dress. I really like playing with, not worrying about what the heads are, and playing with the suggestion of a head rather than trying to come up with something that has any features to it. The other ones that we just looked at have a blocked out head and a just barely suggested nose to it to give it a little bit of form. This one I named Spike. Back during the Vietnam War, there was a sergeant in Vietnam who was drawing cartoons to entertain people, and somehow he got hooked up with newspapers, and they started running his cartoons once a week, and it was called With Sergeant Mike. And they were, I'd wait every week for the Sunday comics to come out so I could see what was going to happen next. And anyway, Spike was one of his characters, and he was this slump-shouldered, pot-bellied, bewildered guy that never really knew what was going on. And that's very definitely the kind of feel that's going on there. I decided to make it red to be sort of representative from all the blood that was shed in the Vietnam War. I turned over that cup that I'd used for heads a lot the other way and turned it into an army helmet. And it's still really not one of my favorite pieces. This one is a lady, I named it Women's Lib, 1969 or something like that. But this lady has on an apron, and she's standing on a magic carpet and facing the future. And that was the idea of what that was going through my head. But optimistic and facing the future, hopefully dropping off the apron at some point. This is another way of playing with the human figure and using very stark straight lines and still coming up with a real interesting form. I made two pieces that were kind of brother and sister. They're both very much different, but with this same sort of shape, and I named them both Stick 'em Up. This one is in Sub-Saharan Africa. Iron is very much a part of their culture. Africa is full of iron ore, and they were forging iron 2,500 years before Europe got it together to do it. Their whole culture and mythology is based on iron. And this guy I call Ogun. Ogun is their god of iron. He's a shared god that's used extensively with hundreds and hundreds of the different tribes down there. And there's actually he protects his followers from anything that is iron, be it a sewing needle or a railroad train or an airplane. Just a protector from anything that could happen to you from a piece of iron. And anyways, this is something that I made for myself, and I think that's the end. Yes, it is. If you have any questions, go ahead and shout them out, please.
I'm assuming that some of these pieces are pretty heavy.
These pieces
They're
are not that.
Because I was wondering about balance, because a lot of them come from one point.
Balance is very much. I play with it all the time when I'm putting them together. And when I was making the lamps, there was an idea that I think it was whoever puts that little sticker on lamps and passes it, government agency, but a floor lamp had to be able to tip 15 degrees and rewrite itself to pass their inspection. And somewhere along the line that stuck, so I always try to make things so that the gravity is where it belongs at the base. The one exception to that is this. It didn't work with this tall one in the center of the thing, and there's a massive weight, it's iron weight underneath the bottom of it to keep it. It was just not enough weight on the bottom.
How hard is that on your body when you do all this work? I mean, to push all that heavy metal around, has that been pretty tough?
It's every bit as it's physically demanding. It's also intellectually demanding. Every time a hammer comes down in between hammer strokes, you have to make a decision. And for years and years, I was swinging a 3 to 4 pound hammer 30,000 times a day. So
But
that
was your first 15 years of just swinging a hammer. You didn't get those machines till the last 30 years, but you did a hammer first 15
well,
years.
just because the machines are there doesn't mean there's not a huge amount of handwork. They allow me to do things efficiently and compete in our economy a little bit better. But they aren't magic at all. You know, if you don't use them right, they can make a mess a whole lot faster than you can with a hand hammer.
How long does it take for that to cool down? I mean, you're at 2,200 degrees, how long is it still pliable? If you're 2,200 degrees, you got about 10 minutes to work with it, or you got 20 minutes to work with it?
No, you got the idea of that old saying, strike while the iron's hot. When it comes out of the fire, it's very hot, and you can work it down to maybe 1,700 degrees or so.
How long does that take?
Depends on the size of the iron. The bigger the piece of iron, the longer it'll hold its heat. But it can be as little as 30 seconds to a heat, and it can be a couple of minutes to a heat. You know, depending on the mass of the piece and what you're trying to do. I'm sorry?
I remember years ago hearing about a camel you made. Would you explain the camel? I remember
Camel?
hearing that you made a camel.
Camel?
Yes.
I was approached by R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, which has their world offices in Winston-Salem, and they wanted they had a new facility they were building, and they wanted a camel to hang over the place that they built in the middle of it for all their employees to relax and have a nice time. And so I worked with a lady who was the head of the department that dealt with graphics and anything that had to do with any kind of imaging for what they did. And she came to me with this idea of a camel that was made out of 4 or 5 pieces, and each one of them would turn independently as a mobile hanging. This was to hang from the ceiling, and we sort of figured out pretty fast that once they turned around, it wouldn't be a camel anymore. So that wasn't going to work. So I designed a camel that was using big cutout sections. This camel ended up being 9 feet tall and 11 feet long. So it had big spaces in it that were cut out of it. And then I went back to that first slide, making those beads, and I made, this camel was made of aluminum rather than steel, again for the weight hanging from the beam up there to get it into a weight where the engineers were happy. And so I made these big bead elements that were that deep or so, and they were suspended and hung in these spaces. And what that did, the rest of the camel was an inch thick, and these elements that made up the body allowed, when you walked around, there was never a place where the camel just turned into a flat line. Everywhere walking around it, it always had some sort of a dimension going for it. And it ended up working very well. When I first started it, the space wasn't defined at all. And the whole thing ended up having a stainless steel interior, so the camel played off of that same sort of color for the metal. And then these elements that I put into them, I painted with oil colors and made them a very soft, iridescent, translucent brown. And it was a real pretty color when the sun was on it. It's iridescent. When it's in the shade, it looks like they're big pillows made out of leather. And somehow or another, the guy who upholstered all the furniture below it used the same color theme that I did. So it matches the room perfectly.
Oh, that's
Did you
great.
put your name on the camel? Did you sign the camel?
Absolutely.
Good for you. This is a very high art farm, but there aren't many people in this form of art, to my understanding,
With the iron?
with the iron. No.
Actually, there are. When I started doing the iron back in the 1970s, there was barely, maybe 1,000 blacksmiths left in the country.
Okay.
World War II just got rid of any need for them. A lot of blacksmiths went to war and came back, and things had changed so much they never bothered to reopen their shops. They became machinists, all sorts of other related things, but the forging wasn't something that was really needed much. And in the 70s, when I started with it, I worked for a year and a half before I knew there was another blacksmith in the San Francisco area. And one day I was at a craft show visiting it to see if I wanted to sign up for it the next year. And I came around the corner, and here's all these guys and half a dozen anvils and all this smoke from a fire, and 12 or 15 blacksmiths. And they were all basically my age, and all people that had found their way to forging iron all by themselves. And they had just formed the California Blacksmith Association, and there was a whole 20 of them.
So now there are a large number.
Anyways, from those small things, it's grown and grown and grown, and now there's in 35 years there's somewhere between 15 and 20,000 blacksmiths in the country.
What kind of things would they be doing besides what you're doing?
Most of them are doing architectural work, railings, lighting, interior and exterior work.
I see.
My shop is, I work alone, and there's only so much you can do working in a little shop alone. Most of the things that, when you're working architectural iron, things like that, most of the things that you're doing take 4 or 6 hands to get them done.
Yeah.
So it's a teamwork, very much a teamwork kind of an operation.
Now, we always think of blacksmiths as with horseshoes. And do blacksmiths still do horseshoes? Or is
Horseshoes? Actually, if somebody does horseshoes as a farrier.
So it's different.
So it's a specialization that came off of blacksmithing.
I see.
That's one little piece of it, as is a wheelwright. Is if you were in a little town, then the blacksmith would be a wheelwright, and he would do horseshoeing and everything. But if you were in a big city, then those would become separate occupations, because there was enough people to enough of a customer base to allow you to specialize.
Yes.
Do you have to order your material then from, like, is there material near where you live, or how does it come shipped to you?
It comes to me in 20-foot lengths, and I can order rounds, flats, rectangular, rectangular flat stock, and things like that. because I have those power hammers, I tend to buy oversized stock, and I can forge it down very comparatively very quickly, and it allows me to get much nicer, bigger lines and more spread to the lines, make them a little more dramatic.
Is there a difference in the quality of steel that you buy?
There are all sorts of specialized alloys. I use just a plain basic mild steel. The specialized alloys would be for tool steels for making different types of tools, knives and cutlery. There's steels that are made specifically for machining. And they have a little tiny bit of lead put into them, so when the blades are doing the machining, the steel doesn't come off in these razor sharp little curls. It all breaks into little beady pieces as it's cut off. Makes it much safer to deal with in the shop where the work's actually being done.
How many hours a day do you work when you have to be so, when to eat and everything? How many hours do you put in a day's work? Do you
Nowadays, about 5 or so. 10 years ago, it was 10.
Can you make a living doing this?
It's been hard. It was very easy through the 80s and 90s. Art is when money goes away, art's one of the first things that goes away as far as an option on how to spend your money. So when that whole .com craze was going on, I was making real good money because there was a wonderful market out there. People were just throwing it everywhere. The different things that have affected our economy have definitely affected me as much as anybody else.
Are the craft fairs still strong though? Joe, are the craft fairs still a strong place to get customers?
Not anymore. They really changed in 2002 or so. They really started to change, and part of it was economic. I don't know. Never did figure out exactly what it was, but there's different things going on at crafts fairs now than there were 10 years ago. And a lot of people are figuring out how to make it a viable way to earn their living. I gave up on it. And also for 30 years, I traveled all over the country, and I was, getting in the truck and driving 10 hours in one direction, setting up a show, being there for 2 or 3 days, and then packing up the truck and turning around and going home, and I just had enough of it.
But do you use the internet at all now? How about the internet? Do you use the internet?
I've tried it. It's not been successful much for me. My pieces have a lot of interest as you walk around them, and so it takes a huge amount of pictures on the internet to try and give people an idea of what they're really buying. So most of the things that I sell now are through galleries.
Do you think college students or any other students are interested in this type of art form in the future?
There are 2 colleges in the United States that offer a master's program in blacksmithing. One of them is the best known one, and the best one is at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. And they've got an incredible program there, and turned out some wonderfully talented new blacksmiths out of it.
Where's the other one?
It's north of Los Angeles. I'm drawing the blank on exactly what the name of the town is, but it is on the West Coast. It's the kind of thing where for a school, it really takes a big commitment to invest in the tooling and the equipment that it takes to put together a realistic shop to where the students can really come in there and actually learn something. If it's just a handful of tools and everything, then everybody's in there playing, but they're not really learning anything.
Liability's pretty high probably, but 2,200 degrees and a kid in there, whoo, burn that hand right off.
The nice thing about working with, I learned that working with hot iron, it's very dangerous to wear a glove because you can grab onto a piece of, when iron can still be 1,000 degrees and look just like a plain piece of cool iron, not have any color to it at all. And so you can grab onto a piece of iron like that with a glove, and all of a sudden, after a few seconds or whatever, you feel the heat coming through. And you let go, but you still got this glove that's burning your hand. So if relying on your calluses and everything, if you get this close, you can feel the radiant heat, and your hand knows enough not to touch it.
Your work is very impressive. I've recently been introduced to the Antique Roadshow, and I'm looking at your art. They have a lot of paintings and portraits and documents, and I'm drawn to this piece. My question to you is, what or who will determine what's an antique? Because art can be anything, and I view that as art. So maybe 10, 20 years from now, that could be worth
Not till
60,
yeah.
70. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I watched that show too.
Really? Right.
I had
Maybe I should get this now.
I had a friend who's had a leather business he's been doing it as long as I've been doing iron. And at one point he needed some cash flow, instant cash flow for his business, and he was looking around for anything they might own to sell, and he found a painting that he'd gotten from a guy when he was in college up in Ohio, where he grew up. And so he called around and he called somebody in the area in Ohio and told them this guy's name, and they said, yeah, he got to be pretty famous. We've got a couple pieces here in the museum, and he died a few years ago. And this piece that's been paid $50 for gave him $25,000 back. So it's an antique roadshow kind of story.
Question? Thank you guys all for coming out tonight.
Wasn't that wonderful?
I don't have business cards. If you go on Facebook and
Very, the first, the last slide you showed me, the first thing that came to my mind was Africa. Very.
I have a big collection. what drove to push this finding out that the only college that is built off
But then it really came through. If you visit DC to see some of the, different places in DC, you've ever been out to the outskirts where they have the Air Force Forum? It's out it's like New York, where they built that new town space shuttle. It looks just like your work. It's maybe 60 feet tall, and it's just, shapes like that. But yeah, it looks a lot like this. Yeah, it's got I believe it was the, I'm pretty sure it's the Air Force. It's one of the military units that I think is the Air Force.
Anybody else does?
You know how it is.
I still got the message from the car.
I have a bird too.
You have a bird. All of these pieces are just beautiful.